Welcome to Norfolk Wine and Spirits and Norfolk Whiskey Group. We have a very special guest today. We have Brett Connors from Castle and Key Distillery based in Kentucky. We just want to have a quick discussion on the whiskeys, and they also have a gin and a rye based vodka. No, bourbon based vodka and a gin based rye. So I should basically turn it over to Brett, who is the head wizard. What else do you have? You have very interesting
Head
titles.
blender. I do some light janitorial work.
Yeah, light.
Yeah, light. I think that's what I've loved about being part of the facility for so long, is I've had the opportunity to do a lot of different activities there. So, just been really fun to watch the site come back to life. So
Yeah. So Castle and Key has been around for a very long time. Not Castle and Key itself, but the site itself has been. It has a great historic significance for whiskey in America, right? So tell us about the founder and a little background on the distillery, and
Absolutely.
then
Yeah, so I think that's a great place to start. Is while we ourselves are a new facility, we have really the fortune of being the steward of a very old site. So the earliest distillation we had at our location was really in the beginning of the 1800s. A farmer miller distiller was turning their excess grains into what we think of as moonshine. Then over the course of the 1800s, you see some small commercial distilleries start to take life there. But the real growth that we have really had the opportunity to restore was attributable to Colonel E.H. Taylor Jr. in the 1880s. So E.H. Taylor Jr. is a monolith. He starts his career in banking. Through banking, finds commodities trading, and goes on to work for companies like W.A. Gaines and Company with Old Crow. He develops OFC, which becomes modern day Buffalo Trace, Old Oscar Pepper, which becomes modern day Woodford Reserve.
some unknown names, right?
Yeah.
Nobody knows about these.
No one knows about it.
Right.
Well, I think what's wild about it is his foresight to be involved at a lot of distilleries. Many of them are still producing whiskey in the modern era. Is I think a huge credit to his legacy.
Right.
But it wasn't just product quality that he was passionate about. It was also marketing and kind of this vision of allowing bourbon to compete against Scotch and other Eurocentric spirits. When he came to our facility in the 1880s, bourbon was seen as the lowest quality product in North America. If you were of the affluent or elite, you came down here and you bought some Scotch, which is an amazing collection around me. Armagnac, cognac, different eau de vies, even rye and rum were all seen as a higher quality than what the state of Kentucky produced. And it infuriated E.H. Taylor, who learned to distill in Europe. He was using a lot of the same technologies that he had seen in Ireland and Scotland, but he didn't feel like we were competing adequately because a lot of your rectifiers and blenders at that time were doing some less desirable things to those products.
Right, and was bourbon? Bourbon was probably different at that time, also, right? The laws were not really clearly defined.
There wasn't a lot. I mean, it was pretty deregulated.
Yeah.
You look at actually Canada passing the first Bottle and Bond Act prior to us, although we did beat the Brits. So, America passed the Bottle and Bond Act in 1897, and a lot of that was individuals like E.H. Taylor who were large proponents of it. He wanted transparency and clarity that what you were buying on the store shelf was something that you knew what it was. At that point in American bourbon, you could go to a store and you could find out that the bottle of bourbon you bought was tainted with things like formaldehyde for mouthfeel, ethyl acetate, different tobacco spit was a popular color additive.
Tobacco spit, okay.
And I always think of this as, I call this bad tequila theory. You meet people and you go, oh, I don't like tequila. I'm like, no, you just don't like bad tequila. That's okay.
Right.
I think there's a world of high quality products, and when we're transparent and honest about what's in a bottle, I think that gives the consumer the right to choose if they are into it or not.
Right.
And E.H. Taylor was also a politician, so when he worked with his friends in Congress to pass that act, he controlled the majority of the stocks in North America that met that requirement. So Congress said this is the purest whiskey that exists in North America in the United States, and E.H. Taylor said that's so weird, I own all of that,
Right.
which is a decent marketing advantage as well. He fought for the Pure Food and Drug Act. He fought against prohibition, but at that point he ends up retiring. We sit dormant into the 30s, and the 30s were owned by a massive consortium called National Distillers purchased the site.
Okay.
You may know of National Distillers if you're a whiskey nerd or you collect. Their historic bottlings are pretty desirable.
Yep.
They own brands like Old Crow, Sunnybrook, Bourbon Deluxe, Hill and Hill, Old Overholt in Pennsylvania, Mount Vernon in Maryland, Old Grandad, Old Crow, just a lot of pretty large facilities.
DRU of his time.
Oh yeah, I mean they were arguably the size of like probably a Heaven Hill plus Sazerac combined. I mean they were a very large corporation.
Right.
They expanded our production to making about 600 to 1,000 barrels of whiskey a day, which is a lot. We were not their largest facility, which is even crazier.
Right.
But then bourbon, fell out of vogue in the 60s and 70s. You see the rise of clear spirits. people were being very health conscious and assuming that things that didn't have color to them were healthier.
Yep.
Although, Bacardi was a big advocate in saying,
Yeah.
Bacardi was healthier for you because it doesn't have any color.
Right.
It's probably not true.
Yeah.
But bourbon, we were losing a lot of money. The CEO or president at the time was pretty anxious, so we shuttered our site in 1972. We continued to age and bottle product there all the way through the merger with Jim Beam in '87. Jim Beam doesn't have an interest in the brands necessarily, the physical site location. We passed hands a few times in the 90s, and we end up with an architectural salvage company in the early 2000s. They do what you would expect them to do. They remove all the copper, brass, anything of value they can get from the site, they took. When we purchased the site with our team in 2014, it did not look beautiful. I mean, we had a massive limestone castle in the middle of central Kentucky that didn't have a roof. 80% of our roofs were damaged, if not missing. No water, no sewage, no electrical. There's literally a forest growing in most of the facility, lots of critters. Then we dove in. Our team didn't have a background in spirits necessarily. Our founding partners, Will Arvin and Wes Murray, were just passionate about the history of the site and passionate about, you're just drawn there in a way. Like if you've ever had the opportunity, hopefully when you come to Kentucky, you'll come visit us.
Sure.
It's one of those places that has a lot of power and feeling to it. When you walk up and you see a massive castle in the middle of Millville, Kentucky, outside of Frankfort, you just can't fabricate that, and there are definitely days in the beginning of the project where building a new facility would have been remarkably more affordable. It would have been more efficient, but that's not who we were.
I think lost something in the process, probably.
Yeah, and I think having a tie to that historical narrative that's accurate, that's honest, that allows us to preserve and restore a piece of Kentucky's history was really important for us. So, from that time on, we started growing and scaling. We opened to the public in September of 2018.
Okay.
Good. I mean, the initial sign we had out front said Castle and Key Distillery coming in spring 2016.
Okay.
And then it said fall 2016, and then it said 2017, and then it just said coming soon.
Coming soon.
We were 2.5 years from what we thought, but I think it was always like, even with our spirits, it's always about doing the right thing, waiting appropriate age times, letting quality always be the driving factor in everything we're doing. Which is why we're starting to expand a little bit. We started initially to release our first 2 products, which were our vodka under the Sacred Spring label, and Sacred Spring, and then Roots of Ruin, which is our kind of flagship gin. And what I love about this is, even on these distillates, it's about quality and purity of product and control. With our vodka, we actually take our bourbon new make, which is 73% white corn, 10% rye, and 17% malted barley. And instead of barreling that, we redistill that to a higher proof and purity, taking it up to 190.
Right.
It's not more cost effective, it's not more efficient.
Right.
Most vodka is going to be distilled from grain neutral spirit, and you clean it up. That's not a criticism. That's a really logical way
that's
to do
quite
it.
quite a departure from normal, because gins, for example, also can be made from any spirit, right? It can be made from a grape-based spirit, could be rum, could be agave spirit gin, but you're using rye for that.
We are using rye, and I think it gives you a better control. It's funny, Will actually went on, our founding partner, along with our previous master distiller, Marianne Eves, went over to London to go just do some R&D and check out gin distilleries.
They know gin.
And they were unanimously told, everyone's like, why are you making your own distillate? You buy grain neutral spirit from the place that makes grain neutral spirit, and then you flavor it, and you add in your botanicals and whatever you're trying to execute in that gin. And for us, it was just, that was fine. I mean, it works for a lot of people who make great gin.
It does, yeah.
I think we're just really fanatical, to take that rye whiskey that I think we're already so good at making.
Yeah.
And I do think, when you're redistilling that and doing all vapor distillation on these botanicals, it gives you a really lavish body, mouthfeel, things that you can't necessarily access as effectively.
From a neutral spirit, yeah.
From a neutral spirit.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it allowed us to talk about our whiskeys when they didn't exist.
Of course.
As we were waiting for a rye to become a minimum 3-year-old, waiting for bourbon to be a minimum 4, wheated bourbon to be a minimum 5-year-old. The vision was, well, how do you talk about something that's in a barrel? So to be able to talk about our grain bills and why we use white corn, and why we use a higher barley percentage, and why we do the things we're doing without them being present in the room, was really beneficial, and it frankly tasted better. So let's just let's go with the obvious here. It tasted good, so we stuck with it. And then the big kind of to do is we released rye whiskey, which is the first matured whiskey that we released, I believe, in 2019. Sorry, COVID's been weird. My brain's all trying to do math.
Of course.
2019, 2020. minimum 3-year-old. The average age on these ryes tends to be around a little over 4 years old, minimum age being 3.5. And every batch is going to be a little bit more dynamic and variant. We allow the barrels to help us in the blend.
Right.
So we're not trying to force to a single profile. We allow the barrels to showcase the way they want to showcase. We also proof everything based on where it tastes the best.
Okay.
So
your proofs are going to be batch by batch.
Batch by batch. You're going to see, normally, with rye whiskey, you'll see them generally in kind of the upper 90s, low hundreds.
Okay.
I think that's going to be a point where that aged rye showcases quite well. We also do no filtration on our whiskeys other than a press filter, so no chill filtration, no carbon filtration, allowing those fats and acids in the whiskey to be its purest form, in our opinion.
Sure.
We do carbon filter our vodkas and gin,
Okay.
which is pretty common. We don't even chill filter those though.
Okay.
But I think
So that's for to leave the texture in there, and in
Yeah.
chill filtering you do take some chemicals out too. Right?
Yeah, I mean, chill filtering I think definitely has a purpose. Like when you're removing those fats and aminos that can cause flocking, you're going to build a very consistent good, and I think you're going to have a very clean mouthfeel with it.
Right.
But for us, I think our perspective was always like having a very round and full-bodied mouthfeel, especially with our whiskeys. Anything that was very thin or fleeting, I find to be a little off-putting. So to have a whiskey that's going to be more full in body, I think was always desirable. I think of it in the way I think of food. If you buy a beautiful ribeye and you trim all the fat off of it and you cook it well done, well, you should have bought something else.
Yeah.
That fat has a lot of flavor, and it's if it's showing well, you should let it be itself.
Right.
And I think that's kind of having a light hand on the blending process.
And we talked a lot about the cask and the casking and the chemical experiments that happen within the cask or processes that go, but we may not have time today to go through all of that. But the bottle is beautiful as well. I mean, look at this. I don't know if we can take a closer look at this. This is really beautiful. Can you tell us a little about this as to how do you guys arrive at that?
I mean, I wish I could take credit for the bottle. I work a lot about on what's inside of them, but I think it's a huge credit to our whole team.
Yeah.
And having a really great unified vision where we knew we wanted a bottle that was very much us.
Yeah.
So we worked with Stranger and Stranger out of New York and London. They've done a lot of other Class A brands like Compass Box. They're just the best in the world at what they do, and they understood who we were.
Yeah.
I think what we were is we're whiskey makers.
Yeah.
What they are is designers.
Right.
So, they ask you a lot of questions. They want to know about your product strategy, and they want to come visit the site, and they want to do all these things. And then they give you options, and they kind of go through there. It's kind of a create your own adventure.
Yeah.
Do you like this? Do you not like this? What colors do you like? Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Right.
In some ways, it reminds me of dating. You're asking a lot of questions, and the other person figures out if they're into it.
Okay.
But with these, it's custom glass. There's a lot of really cute little secrets with it. Castle and Keys embossed on the bottom.
Yeah.
It's actually, the top is made to mimic our on-site spring. It's a Roman-style bathhouse or peristyle that was developed by E.H. Taylor. And the top is made to kind of mimic this, not a gazebo, but it's really just this circular feature on that architecture, which is gorgeous.
Okay.
The labels are all done on really heavy, nice, beautiful paper, metal deco pieces. And then we do something crazy is we don't charge you for the fact that we wanted a really pretty bottle.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it exorbitantly expensive.
Right.
We try to price all these products where you can grab a bottle and not feel bad about opening it, which I think is a really nice thing to do as well.
Key. Yeah.
It's key.
Yeah. So on the whiskey front, you have 2 ryes that are coming into Massachusetts. Is that correct?
So you might see some single barrels starting to articulate
Okay.
into or trickle into Massachusetts. Our Restoration Rye batches are kind of the flagship, so they should be readily available most of the year is the goal. We release new batches as we deplete old batches, and we try to make those creative.
Okay.
Single barrels, you'll probably start trickling out. This year we just didn't have a lot. We have really quite high standards with single barrels. We want them not just to be a good expression of our product, but an interesting expression of it.
Sure.
Dynamic and unique and balanced on its own. As a blender, I think our blended good is great. I think we work really hard to make it tasty.
Yeah.
Single barrels, there's nothing you can do to them.
Yeah.
So they have to be really good on their own.
It's more challenging.
It wouldn't surprise me next year if you start to see more single barrels available in this market, which, everybody loves a good cash strength single barrel now. I think that's definitely where the market's going. Bourbon as well. I think this year was the first time in over 50 years we released a bourbon from site that was led by the Castle and Key team. So minimum 4-year-old. There's a bunch of 5-year-old in that bottling. The first 2 batches sold out instantly. They were gone.
Sure.
it far exceeded our I thought it would sell eventually. I didn't know it would be gone the second it hit retail.
In the market. Okay.
But this year it wouldn't surprise me. We're working on seeing if we can't get another blend together currently. So after I leave Boston, I'm gonna head home and work with our co-blender, head blender, John Brown, and our sensory team, and we're gonna see if we can't get another couple options together for fall this year.
Sure.
You might see a wheated bourbon release this fall.
Okay.
That's gonna be pretty limited. We just don't have a ton of barrels to work with, and with those blends, you don't want to overly cannibalize your best barrels. It's about building a great product. So if we use all the best barrels once, we wouldn't have anything next year. So so I think wheated will probably be a small release too. That should
so you have two different type of bourbons.
Yep. So we have what
different
we call traditional, but a rye based secondary grain. So white corn, rye, and malted barley.
Okay.
We also have a wheated bourbon, which is white corn, white wheat, and malted barley. So wheated being a little bit softer, doughier, rounder. I get more of like a phyllo dough, kind of like baklava, like honeycomb tone to it. Where our traditional bourbon is going to have a little bit more body, structure, spice. It's just different secondary grains.
It's amazing. So, and it's going to be a lot of fun actually tasting different, even the rye, the flagship rye, if you will. What do you call that?
Restoration
Rye.
With the white label?
Yeah, with the white label. Yeah, so because every batch is slightly different.
Yeah.
So that's a fun part of exploring and kind of finding different whiskeys.
Yeah, well, and I think it's us listening to what the market wants as well. I think with a store like this, it's such a great example is, you probably have a lot of people who come in and want to explore, want to change and challenge their palate.
Right.
My granddad and my dad really for a long time only drank one whiskey.
Yeah.
And then now even my dad will try other stuff because you have one life to live. You might as well explore what's out there.
Things, and it's okay if somebody wants to drink the same whiskey. More power to them.
Awesome.
That's fine.
As long as you're doing it responsibly, that's a wonderful choice to make. For us, there's so many great things happening in the world of whiskey right now.
Right.
I always say try something new. And worst case scenario, you don't like it.
Yeah. So what?
And that's what's great about these batches is you might find a batch you adore. It's your favorite whiskey of all time. You better buy all of it because we can never replicate it.
Never replicate. Listen, Brett, I know we can talk for quite a bit, and you have a busy schedule today. So thanks for taking time, and I'm sure we'll see you soon. Hopefully, you will be back here in the market. And he's such a wealth of knowledge. We scraped the surface slightly, but you can see the passion, you can see the knowledge that's emanating from Brett and the team at Castle & Key. So look forward to doing a tasting very soon. It's arriving in Massachusetts hopefully this week, and good luck with everything.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you for having us. Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.